On the morning the city rolled out its new civility upgrade, my mother's dialysis schedule was moved again, and the clerk smiled as if rescheduling a life was a courtesy. In Graybridge, politeness was an industry. Every sentence had to be soft, every complaint wrapped in apology, every injustice delivered with a coupon code. The billboard outside the clinic showed a pastel hand holding a pen and the slogan, "Say it nicely." I stared at it until the letters blurred, because niceness had never saved us. Then my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't remember installing. Inkback protocol connected. A minimalist icon, an ink droplet bouncing back like a rubber stamp pulsed once, and a line of text appeared beneath it. Counter a humiliation. Receive funds. Precision increases payout. I didn't believe in miracles, but I believed in invoices, and my mother's kidneys didn't care whether my salvation came from prayer or a suspicious app. My name is Mara Vance. I'm 26, a junior contract archivist for the Port Authority, meaning I spend my days scanning old paperwork into newer paperwork and pretending that history is something you can file. My father died 9 years ago when a ferry crane failed during a night storm and a shipping container slid like a guillotine. The company issued condolences, then issued silence. My father's compensation was supposed to help me finish school and help my mother, Lena, breathe. Instead, it went into the pockets of people who said the word family like a lock. My paternal relatives, grandmother Odette, Aunt Sable, and Uncle Bram arrived with lawyerly sympathy and left with the settlement. They also left us with a suitcase on the curb, because Odette declared that a widow was bad luck for the house. We moved into a narrow apartment above a fish salt shop, and my mother learned how to smile through fatigue the way other people learn to swim. That smile became dangerous once her kidneys began to fail. The doctor used phrases like end stage and bridge therapy and transplant if a match becomes available, as if language could pad the blow. The estimated cost was a number so big, it felt like a separate country. We didn't have that country. We had my small salary, my mother's dwindling work as a seamstress, and a family tree that had pruned us off with a blunt blade. When the holiday season arrived, Graybridge's Lantern Week, a 7-day festival of seafood feasts and forced nostalgia, Aunt Sable called with a voice sweet as canned syrup. "Bring your mother," she said. "Odette is turning 75. It's time we put old grudges aside." My mother's hand tightened on the phone like she was gripping a rail in a storm. After the call, she whispered, "Your father would want us to go." I wanted to say, "Your father would want them to pay back what they stole." Instead, I swallowed, because my mother's softness was not weakness. It was the only thing she had been allowed to keep. So we went. The restaurant Odette chose sat on the pier. All polished glass and velvet chairs, the kind of place that charged extra for the privilege of breathing near the sea. We arrived early, so early that my mother checked the time twice, anxious she'd misread it. Yet when we stepped into the private room, the table looked like a battlefield after victory. Plates scraped, crab shells stacked, soup bowls empty, chopsticks abandoned like broken ribs. Every seat was occupied except 2, and those 2 were blocked by a tower of used dishes as if someone had intentionally barricaded our existence. Aunt Sable clicked her tongue. "Oh, you're finally here," she said loudly. We couldn't let the children starve waiting, so we started. "Mara, go settle the bill at the front when you get a chance. It's only fair since you came late." My mother's face went pale. We hadn't been late. We'd been humiliated on schedule. I felt heat climb my neck. Before I could speak, my phone vibrated again. The Inkback droplet icon lit up. A prompt slid across the screen. Humiliation detected. Eligible for counter. Then, in the strangest calm voice I'd ever heard, mechanical but not cold, my earbuds chimed, even though I wasn't wearing them. "Welcome, user Mara Vance. The Inkback protocol rewards accurate pushback. Minimum reward, 300 credits. Escalation increases reward, non-violent only." My hands went numb. This was either a scam or a crack in the universe. My mother's breathing sounded thin beside me. The prompt waited, pulsing like a heart. So I chose. I looked at Aunt Sable and smiled the way I'd watched her smile at other people's pain. "You started early because you were afraid the children would starve?" I asked, voice light. "How thoughtful. Next time you can also start the funeral early so you can get to dessert faster." The room went silent, the kind of silence that tastes like metal. Uncle Bram's fork froze midair. Odette's eyes sharpened. Aunt Sable's cheeks flushed. My phone buzzed. +300 credits transferred. My throat tightened, not from guilt, but from relief so sharp it hurt. The app was real. The money was real. And my mouth apparently was now a tool. Odette tapped her cane on the floor. "Mara," she said, slow and disapproving. "You speak like a street vendor. We are a respectable family." Her words hit my mother like a familiar slap. I felt the Inkback prompt flicker. Rank pressure. Counter yields bonus. I had spent years swallowing because swallowing kept the peace, and peace kept my mother from shaking. But peace hadn't saved her kidneys. I leaned in slightly. "Respectable?" I asked. "Grandmother, you're right. Respectable families don't eat before guests arrive and then ask those guests to pay. Respectable families also don't cash out a dead man's life insurance and then evict his widow." Aunt Sable gasped as if I'd thrown a plate. Bram's face darkened. Odette's mouth tightened. My phone buzzed again. Plus 650 credits. The numbers stacked quietly, like coins in a jar, like dialysis sessions bought one insult at a time. My mother reached for my sleeve. "Mara," she whispered, pleading, "don't." Her voice was the old reflex. Don't make it worse. Don't provoke. Don't give them a reason. I turned my hand and squeezed hers. "Mom," I said gently, "they've been giving themselves reasons for years." Then I stood, walked to the empty corner of the room, and dragged 2 chairs into space with a screech that made everyone flinch. The sound felt like permission. I set the chairs beside my mother and sat her down as if placing a fragile artifact in a protected case. We ate what remained cold fish, lukewarm soup because hunger doesn't care about pride. They watched us like we were a scandal. Good. Scandals are sometimes the only thing people understand. The next volley came quickly. Bram leaned back, smirking. "So," he said, "still working at the Port Authority? Scanning papers? That's cute. I heard you studied cultural history. Those degrees are just expensive hobbies. You should have taken something practical, like our son Rel Engineering. He's making real money now." The words were bait, and the room waited for me to bite the way I used to. Defensively, clumsily, giving them the satisfaction of watching me squirm. The Inkback app offered a suggestion. Mirror inquiry. Use specifics. Avoid slurs. I chewed my rice, calm. "Engineering is great," I said. "How nice for Rel. He must have an apartment by now." Bram puffed. "Of course," he said too fast. I angled my head. "Which district?" I asked. "How many square meters? Did he buy outright or is he paying interest? And does he still share his password with his mother? Or has he learned adult boundaries yet?" The smirk slid off Bram's face like grease off a pan. Aunt Sable's eyes narrowed. Bram's mouth opened, closed. My phone buzzed. Plus 700 credits. I lifted my cup of water to hide my smile. Aunt Sable recovered by shifting targets. "Mara," she cooed. "You're 26, yes? No partner yet? Don't you worry your mother? A woman without a man is like a boat without an anchor." The room hummed with judgment. My mother's shoulders curled inward. Shame rising like tide. I felt rage surge, bright and clean. The Inkback prompt flashed. Sexist provocation. Counter yields high. I set my cup down carefully. "Aunt," I said pleasantly, "if you're so concerned about anchors, perhaps you should check your own boat. Last I heard, Uncle Bram's anchor keeps slipping into other harbors." Bram choked on his drink. Aunt Sable's face went stiff. My phone vibrated. Plus 1,200 credits. My mother's eyes widened in horror, then flickered with something I hadn't seen in years. Suppressed laughter. She covered her mouth with her hand, and I realized that joy, too, could be a rebellion. Sable, furious, slapped her phone onto the table and swiped to a photo. "Enough," she said. I brought a solution. "Mara, this is Director Halden Trusk. Important man. He owns property. He drives a Veldor sedan. He's looking for a wife. He's willing to help with your mother's situation." The photo showed a man with a receding hairline that looked like it was retreating from responsibility. The Inkback prompt updated. Transactional coercion. Protect self. Protect mother. Counter may trigger escalation. My stomach dropped. They knew about the transplant cost. They were offering bait with a hook. My body for my mother's organs. My mother's voice trembled. "Sable, no," she said. "Mara is not." Sable waved her off. "Don't be stubborn," she snapped. "If Mara marries well, your dialysis problem disappears. Isn't that worth a little sacrifice? I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. I looked at the photo again and smiled sweetly. Director Trusk? I said aloud. Looks like he's already married. Sable blinked. He's divorced, she snapped. I leaned closer. No, I said. I mean, he's already married. To the concept of himself. A few of the younger cousins snorted and then coughed to hide it. My phone buzzed. Plus 1,500 credits. Sable's jaw clenched. Odette's cane tapped again, sharp as a gavel. Odette tried a different weapon. Liquor. She gestured to the server. Pour Lena a drink, she ordered. A little wine won't kill her. It's my birthday. Don't ruin it. My mother shook her head, weak. I can't, she whispered. Antibiotics. Odette's lips curled. Excuses, she said. The table began to chorus. Bram, Sable, even Rel voices overlapping like waves trying to drown us. Just one cup. Don't be dramatic. She's always making scenes. My phone vibrated with a low warning. Medical coercion detected. Counter may prevent harm. High reward. I reached into my bag, pulled out a blister pack, and placed it on the Lazy Susan with a loud click. The room froze. I said, brightly, perfect. Since we're ignoring medical advice, let's make it fair. Everyone take one pill, vitamin, antibiotic, whatever you like, and then we can all drink together. I began snapping tablets into small piles in front of each person, narrating like a hostess. One for Aunt Sable, one for Uncle Bram, one for Rel. Oh, and grandmother, you can have 2 elders get priority. Color drained from their faces. Rel blurted, That's dangerous. I lifted my eyebrows. Exactly, I said, voice calm and cutting. So why are you trying to make my mother do it? Silence landed heavy. My phone buzzed. Plus 2,000 credits. My mother stared at the pills, then at me. And for the first time, she didn't tell me to stop. She simply reached for my hand under the table and held it like an anchor that belonged to her. The dinner ended in forced smiles and clenched teeth. Odette distributed red envelopes for tradition. The younger cousins tore theirs open and squealed. My envelope felt light. Inside were 2 crisp notes, an insult pretending to be generosity. Aunt Sable watched my reaction with a predatory grin. Then she turned to my mother. And where is your gift to Mother? She asked loudly. My mother had prepared an envelope with 500 credits, everything she could spare without risking her next medication refill. Sable snatched it, opened it, scoffed. 500? She said. How embarrassing. You have money for hospitals but not for family respect. My mother's face flushed with shame so deep it looked like pain. The Inkback prompt pulsed. Financial shaming. Counter yields bonus. I placed my tiny envelope on the table with exaggerated care. Here, I said, loud enough for the room. Your massive generosity is too heavy for my pockets. I'm returning it before I need a forklift. Several cousins laughed openly. Odette's eyes flashed. Sable's grin faltered. My phone buzzed. Plus 900 credits. The money kept arriving, small storms of digits, and I kept thinking, if cruelty can be monetized, perhaps so can resistance. Then Odette delivered the real demand. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin like she was wiping away our existence. Lena, she said, you will pay the bill. And since you are here, tell the server to pack me 2 lobsters. The Australian kind. I want them for later. The bill would be brutal. My mother's fingers tightened around her phone, calculating what she could not afford. I felt the familiar urge to surrender, to smooth things over, because surrender was the only language my mother had been allowed to speak in their house. The Inkback prompt suggested, redirect obligation. I smiled at Odette. Grandmother, I said, 2 lobsters is so modest for 75. Let's do 5. And add king crab razor clams, the rare fish 2 portions each. You deserve abundance. Odette's eyes lit up greedily. My mother's face turned white. Under the table, she grabbed my knee in panic. I squeezed her hand gently. Don't worry, I whispered. We're not paying. Aloud, I called the server and, with the sweetest voice, said, Please bring the invoice to the room. They will settle it. We're leaving early because my mother needs rest. Then I took my mother's arm and walked out before anyone could process the shift. In the corridor, my mother hissed, terrified. Mara, we can't. I held up my phone, showed her the growing balance. We can, I whispered, and we won't. Behind us, the private room erupted. I didn't need to hear it to know. I could taste the chaos like ozone before lightning. We sat in the lobby's shadowed corner, my mother trembling, my phone on silent, my heart racing with the thrill and terror of defiance. Calls flooded in. Sable, Bram, Rel. I declined them all. Messages popped up. Eve. Ungrateful. You'll regret this, I replied once calmly. If you want lobster, pay for lobster. If you want obedience, buy a mirror. My phone buzzed. Plus 3,000 credits. The app rewarded even text-based pushback. When the restaurant staff finally cornered Odette's family with the bill now swollen by my generous add-ons, they turned on each other in predictable ways. Bram claimed Odette demanded it. Sable claimed Bram promised to pay. Odette screamed that a widow should have paid. The argument was loud enough that other diners watched. Phones out. Public humiliation has a way of equalizing. Later, as we walked home in cold air, my mother whispered, voice shaky but amazed, "Where did this money come from?" I swallowed. "A system," I said. "A strange one. It pays when I push back." My mother stared at me like I'd confessed to sorcery. "Is it safe?" she asked. I looked at the balance and thought of my words like knives. "Safer than silence," I said, though I wasn't sure. I didn't tell her everything at first. I didn't tell her that the Inkback protocol had rules embedded in it, no physical violence, no doxing, no threats of harm, because it wasn't trying to make me cruel. It was trying to make me precise. Each time I countered a humiliation, the app analyzed tone, timing, audience, and the humiliator's social leverage. It rewarded not just insults but exposure, pointing out contradictions, naming exploitation, refusing coerced norms. The bigger the power imbalance, the higher the payout. I began to understand that the protocol wasn't random. It was designed, maybe by someone who had been chewed up by Graybridge's politeness industry, and decided to build an economy for honesty. Over the next 2 weeks, I treated the city like a training ground. The elevator neighbor who dumped trash outside our door and blamed wind. I returned his bag to his doorstep with a note. "Your wind has your address. Plus 400 credits." The coworker who called me too emotional when I requested overtime pay, I replied, "If I'm emotional, it's because you keep stealing hours." Plus 700 credits. The ex who sent me an invitation to his wedding with a smug message about how I'd missed my window, I wrote back, "Congratulations. May your new partner enjoy the version of you I already returned for a refund." Plus 900 credits. The app paid quickly, like it was eager. My balance climbed. My mother's dialysis fees stopped feeling like a cliff edge and started feeling like a staircase we could climb, one step at a time. Yet the more I used the protocol, the more I noticed something unsettling. It didn't just reward me. It watched me. It tracked who I fought, what patterns of humiliation existed, how the city's social machinery turned softness into leverage. It was building a map of cruelty. And maps can be used for rescue or conquest. On Lantern Week's 3rd day, Aunt Sable arrived at our apartment uninvited, as if boundaries were a myth poor people told themselves. She came with Odette and Bram, all dressed in expensive coats, their faces set in righteous fury. My mother stood by the sink, hands wet, eyes wide. Sable smiled like a blade. "Lena," she said, "good news. We found a kidney match." My heart lurched. My mother's mouth opened in disbelief. Sable leaned forward, voice syrupy. "A donor. Perfect type. The surgery can be scheduled soon." But she pulled out a folder and slapped it onto our table. The folder contained a contract. Waiver of claims and transfer of interest. In plain language, my mother would renounce any claim to my father's old house on Driftwood Lane, a property Odette still lived in, the property that had been tied up in family stewardship for years. In exchange, Odette would assist with transplant costs. "Sign," Odette said simply. "And you live. Refuse, and you wait. Waiting kills." My mother's face drained. I felt ice in my veins. This wasn't help. It was extortion wearing a family mask. My phone buzzed, heavy. High-stakes coercion detected. Counter yields maximum. I looked at my mother. Her lips trembled. She had been trained to choose sacrifice. I decided to untrain her. I took the contract, flipped through it slowly, and then laughed a small laugh that sounded foreign in our kitchen. "Grandmother," I said, "you're offering 200,000 credits to buy a house worth triple that. That's not assistance. That's theft with a receipt." Bram snapped. "Watch your mouth." I met his eyes, I'm watching it, I said calmly. It's speaking truth. Odette's cane struck the floor. You ungrateful girl, she hissed. Your father would be ashamed. I felt the Inkback app prompt. Invoke memory. Reverse guilt. I leaned forward, voice low. If my father were here, I said, he would be ashamed of you. He ran through rain and steel to keep this family afloat. You used his death like a coupon. You took his compensation and called it tradition. Now you're trying to trade my mother's organs for real estate. My mother inhaled sharply, like the words were oxygen. My phone buzzed. Plus 8,000 credits. The number startled even me. Odette's face twitched. Sable's eyes narrowed with hunger not for fairness, but for money. She stared at my phone like it was a vein of gold and rock. Where did you get that balance? Sable asked, trying to sound casual and failing. 500,000 credits doesn't appear from nothing. My mother glanced at me. Fear and confusion tangled. I could have lied. Lies are easier when you've practiced politeness as survival. But the protocol's whole premise was that truth is a weapon. I raised my phone and said, I earned it by refusing to be your doormat. Sable's nostrils flared. How? She pressed. Odette barked. It's illegal. Bram's eyes gleamed with calculation. The Inkback prompt flashed. Information extraction attempt. Counter. Withhold. Redirect. I smiled. If you want to know, I said softly, carry 40 kilos of rice barefoot to the clinic in 10 minutes. Then I'll explain. Sable's face reddened. That's impossible, she snapped. I tilted my head. My father did it once, I said. When your son collapsed at school, he ran, because you were too busy to drive. He never asked you to repay him. But here you are, demanding my mother sign away her home for assistance. Silence thickened. Odette's hands trembled. My phone buzzed. Plus 4,500 credits. My mother's eyes filled with tears, not just of fear, but of recognition. She was seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time. Odette tried the final tactic, authority. I am your elder, she said, voice rising. You will show respect. I looked at her. Really looked. At the expensive coat, the jewelry bought with a dead man's compensation, the mouth that had called my mother bad luck and then called her family. The Inkback prompt suggested, define respect. I spoke slowly. Respect, I said, is not obedience. Respect is what you give when someone treats you like a human. You don't want respect. You want control. Odette's eyes bulged. I will call the police, she spat. I gave a small nod. Do, I said. And while you're at it, explain to them why you are coercing a medically vulnerable widow with a contract under duress. Bram grabbed Sable's elbow, pulling her back. Sable hissed, You'll regret this. No one else will give you a kidney. I smiled, cold and steady. We'll find our own way, I said, and we won't pay rent to your cruelty. They left in a storm of perfume and indignation. When the door shut, my mother collapsed into a chair and began to shake. I knelt beside her. Mom, I whispered, I'm sorry. She wiped her face with trembling fingers and said, very quietly, Don't be sorry. Be loud. I've been quiet for too long. That sentence changed everything. The next day, my mother asked me to show her the protocol. I hesitated, because the app felt like a blade, useful, but sharp enough to cut its holder. But she insisted. We sat at the table with tea cooling between us. I opened the app. It displayed a simple dashboard. Balance, counters, impact score, and a curious tab labeled Ledger. When I tapped Ledger, a list of incidents appeared time-stamped, categorized. Family coercion, workplace wage theft, public shaming, medical pressure. Each entry included a short transcript of what was said, my response, and the result. It was documenting power. My mother stared at the list, eyes wide. It keeps receipts, she murmured, of words. I nodded, careful. Words are evidence, I said. The app's description read, Humiliation thrives in deniability. Convert deniability into record. My mother's hands trembled. Then we can use this, she whispered. Not just for money. I felt a thrill. Yes, I replied. We can use it to prove what they did. I contacted a legal aid clinic that specialized in housing disputes and inheritance fraud. The receptionist tried to dismiss me at first. Graybridge is full of people with sad stories, and staff are trained to triage sadness like it's an infection. But when I mentioned the ledger entries, when I said I had transcripts and time-stamped evidence of extortion tied to medical coercion, the receptionist's tone changed. "Bring everything," she said. The clinic assigned us a lawyer named Juno Reed, a small woman with sharp eyes and tired humor. Juno read the contract Odette had brought and whistled softly. "They're bold," she said. "This is duress, and you have a strong claim to the Driftwood property if your father's settlement was misallocated." My mother's hands shook. "They'll say it's family," she whispered. Juno snorted. "Family isn't a legal defense," she said. "It's just a word people use to make theft feel sentimental." I liked her immediately. We filed suit. The act itself felt like stepping onto a stage with no rehearsal. Odette responded with outrage and theatrics. She sent messages through relatives I barely knew, accusing me of being unfilial, greedy, possessed by modern arrogance. Graybridge loves moral labels because labels are cheaper than refunds. The Inkback protocol loved their messages too. Every time someone tried to shame me into silence, the app offered counters that both paid and archived. But Juno warned me, "Don't let the app turn you into a flamethrower. Court likes clarity, not spectacle." I nodded once. The protocol, surprisingly, reinforced her advice. Precision outperforms rage. Target behavior, not identity. Whoever built it understood that cruelty disguised as wit still rots the user. The protocol wasn't a demon. It was a tool designed by someone who had learned, painfully, that language can be sharpened without being poisoned. Meanwhile, the transplant clock ticked. My mother stayed on dialysis, fragile but stubborn. In the clinic waiting room, people still spoke politely while their eyes measured each other's pain. I began using the protocol differently. I countered systemic humiliations rather than personal ones. When a billing officer told an elderly man, "You should have planned better," I said, loud enough for the room. "Planning doesn't fix predatory pricing. Your spreadsheet isn't moral. Plus 500 credits. When a nurse scolded my mother for fainting, I said, "Her body is doing calculus with broken organs. Please don't grade her. Plus 600 credits. The app rewarded these interventions, but more importantly, the room shifted. People looked up. Someone offered my mother water. Another patient nodded at me. Solidarity silent but real. Humiliation dies when it's witnessed and named. The first court hearing arrived in late winter, when the sea wind felt like glass shards. Odette came in a black coat as if attending a funeral, clutching a tissue she never used, rehearsing grief for the judge. Sable wore a pearl necklace and a smile that looked glued on. Bram glared like an insult was a weapon. My mother wore a simple scarf and held her posture carefully, as if her body were a delicate object that could be dismissed if it looked too weak. Juno sat beside us, calm. "Let them perform," she whispered. "We'll bring the receipts." Odette's lawyer argued that the Driftwood property had been managed for the family, that Lena had abandoned it when she moved out, that Mara was a resentful child trying to punish elders. Odette herself cried about tradition. The judge listened, face neutral. Then Juno stood and presented the ledger entries. The contract, the audio transcript of Odette saying, "Waiting kills," the messages from Sable referencing the kidney match as leverage, the record of settlement transfer dates matching the week after my father's death. Odette's lawyer objected. Juno smiled. "These are contemporaneous records," she said. "Time-stamped, device verified." The judge's eyebrows lifted. For the first time, Odette's performance faltered. The courtroom air shifted, like wind turning. Outside, reporters asked for comments. Graybridge's local news loved family drama. It sold ad space between weather updates. Sable tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. Bram claimed I had fabricated evidence. The Inkback protocol vibrated with a warning. Public narrative battle. Counter-optional. I wanted to unleash every clever line I'd ever held back. But I remembered Juno's advice. So I said simply, "We are not here to entertain. We are here to survive." The simplicity landed harder than a joke. My phone buzzed anyway, plus 1,000 credits. The protocol rewarded restraint too. Interesting. Retaliation arrived as expected. The next morning, my Port Authority supervisor called me into a glass office that smelled like disinfectant and fear. "Mara," he said, avoiding my eyes, "we've received concerns about your professionalism. Family disputes can reflect poorly on public agencies." Translation. Someone had pressured him, likely Bram, who had friends in shipping unions. The supervisor slid a form across the desk, an ethics review. My stomach tightened. Losing my job would sink us. The Inkback prompt appeared. Workplace intimidation. Counter yields medium-high. I kept my voice calm. Are these concerns documented? I asked. He hesitated. It's informal, he admitted. I nodded again. Then please document who contacted you, I said. Because public agencies are required to report external influence attempts. His face paled. He stammered. That's not necessary. I smiled politely. It's necessary, I said, or we can document it for the court. The supervisor swallowed, then shoved the form back into his drawer. No review, he muttered. My phone buzzed. Plus 1,200 credits. I walked out with my job intact, heart pounding. I realized the protocol was teaching me a skill I'd never had. To treat intimidation as paperwork, to turn pressure into record. As the case progressed, cracks appeared in the family's united front. Cousin Relbram's son messaged me late one night. His text was short. Did they really take Dad's settlement? I stared at the screen. The Inkback protocol offered opportunity, recruit witness, use facts, avoid gloating. I typed carefully. Yes, I wrote, and they told us it was for the family. If you want, I can show you the transfer records. A long pause. Then, I didn't know. Mom told me you were greedy. I exhaled. I want my mother alive, I wrote. That's not greed. The app buzzed softly, plus 300 credits labeled Bridge Built. It rewarded reconciliation too. The protocol wasn't purely combative. It was anti-humiliation, which sometimes meant restoring truth between people separated by lies. Rel agreed to meet. In a quiet cafe, he looked exhausted, like someone who had carried other people's narratives as weights. I showed him documents. His face whitened. They use Dad's college fund too, he whispered. I dipped my chin. They use everyone, I said. Rel's jaw clenched. I'll testify, he said quietly. That was the moment the family's theater started to collapse from inside. The transplant miracle arrived in the least miraculous way. An ordinary tragedy. A warehouse accident. A donor registry. A phone call at dawn. We have a potential match, the coordinator said. Can Lena come immediately? My mother's hands shook so hard she spilled tea. I felt my knees go weak. This was what we had been clawing toward. We rushed to the hospital. The corridors smelled like antiseptic and fear. Nurses moved fast, faces practiced. My mother signed forms with trembling fingers. I sat beside her, trying to pretend my heart wasn't a bird slamming against ribs. In a waiting room, my phone buzzed with a new Inkback notification. If you want to keep what you fought for, stop fighting the wrong battles. Protect your tenderness. Spend it wisely. For a system that paid me to speak sharply, the message felt strangely kind. I turned the phone face down. Sable and Odette found out anyway. News travels faster when greed is listening. They arrived at the hospital with gifts and cameras, trying to rewrite themselves as saviors in real time. Sable held a bouquet like a shield. Lena, she cried, loud enough for passers-by. We're here for you. Family is everything. My mother lay in a gown, IV in arm, eyes tired. Odette leaned in. If you sign now, she whispered, holding the contract again, you won't have to worry. We will handle the bills. Think of Mara's future. My mother's gaze flicked to me. For a heartbeat, I saw the old reflex sacrifice. Surrender. Quiet. Then she surprised me. She took the contract, looked at it, and tore it in half with a slow, deliberate motion. Paper ripped like a small thunderclap. Sable gasped. Odette's face contorted. My mother's voice was steady, quiet but lethal. My future, she said, is not for sale, and neither is my daughter. The Inkback protocol buzzed in my pocket without me touching it, plus 10,000 credits. Label. Boundary reclaimed. I blinked hard. My mother had just earned money by refusing humiliation, and she didn't even know she'd done it. Maybe the protocol wasn't tied to my mouth alone. Maybe it was tied to truth spoken aloud, by anyone under my account. That thought warmed me more than the credits. Security escorted Odette's family out when they began shouting. Odette screamed about unfilial children and stolen houses. A nurse, exhausted, snapped. Ma'am, this is a transplant unit, not your theater. I could have laughed. Instead, I held my mother's hand as they wheeled her towards surgery. Her fingers were cold. "Mara," she whispered, voice thin, "if I don't wake up." "You will," I said, too fiercely. "And when you do, we'll go home." She smiled faintly. "Home," she repeated, like the word was new. The doors closed. I was left in the waiting room with fluorescent lights and a heart that had no place to put its fear. The surgery took hours. I sat beside Juno, who had shown up with coffee and quiet solidarity. She didn't ask me to be brave. She simply existed in the same space, which is sometimes the greatest help. Rel texted updates about his parents' rage, about how Bram blamed Odette, how Sable blamed me, how everyone blamed everyone because blame is cheaper than change. The Inkback protocol remained silent for once. It didn't reward me for waiting. Waiting isn't a counter. Waiting is just what love does when it has no control. My mother survived. The surgeon came out with tired eyes and said, "The kidney is functioning." I cried so hard my chest hurt. When I finally saw my mother in recovery, pale but alive, she whispered, "It feels quieter." I didn't know if she meant her body or her heart, maybe both. As she healed, the court case continued. Odette, furious that her leverage had failed, doubled down on spite. She refused to leave Driftwood Lane even after preliminary rulings confirmed my mother's majority claim. "No one will evict an old woman," she sneered in messages. She was right. Evicting elders is politically ugly. Greybridge officials preferred problems that stayed quiet. So we became creative. Not cruel, Juno insisted on legal methods, but creative. Because creativity is just strategy with humor. I bought the unit above Driftwood Lane's house through a shell trust Juno helped set up. It was legal. The property was on the market due to unpaid fees. Odette didn't notice until the new tenants moved in. A group of night shift dock medics who slept during the day and hosted decompression nights on their off hours. They weren't criminals. They weren't violent. They were simply loud, laughing, living, dragging chairs, playing bass-heavy music, and occasionally practicing CPR drills that sounded like rhythmic thumps. Odette called the police. The police shrugged noise within permitted hours. Lease intact. Nothing to do. Odette called the landlord. I answered. "Hello, grandmother," I said sweetly. "How's the ambiance?" She sputtered. The Inkback protocol buzzed. Plus 2,500 credits. Label. Nonviolent pressure. Odette's sleep fractured. Her dignity cracked. After weeks, she finally left Driftwood Lane, Kane trembling, eyes furious. Bram and Sable fought over who would take her in. Because burdens are always family, until they arrive on your couch. In the end, Bram took her, bitterly. Sable refused, claiming space issues. Rel told me, voice hollow, "They hate each other now." I answered, "They always did. They just had a shared target before." The final court hearing was less dramatic than people wanted. No one exploded. No one confessed with a tearful monologue. Real life rarely pays for theatrics. The judge reviewed evidence, including Rel's testimony about family finances and my father's settlement. The judge ruled that Driftwood Lane belonged to my mother and me, with Odette entitled only to a calculated share paid out at market value enough to be fair, not enough to reward theft. Odette's lawyer argued about tradition. The judge replied dryly, "Tradition is not a bank account." When the gavel fell, I felt a strange emptiness, like finishing a marathon and realizing you still have to walk home. The Inkback protocol buzzed. Plus 15,000 credits. Label, justice event. The app paid for court victory too, as if it recognized that pushing back can be institutional, not just verbal. Afterwards, Sable cornered me outside the courthouse, eyes wild. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "Do you know how much you've cost us?" I looked at her, at the fury and entitlement and hunger. The Inkback prompt offered a dozen sharp replies. I chose one sentence, quiet and clean. "I didn't cost you anything," I said. "You spent my father." Her face contorted. For a second, she looked like she might slap me, but cameras were nearby and she liked her image. She spat on the ground instead and stormed away. My phone buzzed softly. Plus 1,000 credits. Label. Clean strike. I realized the protocol favored clarity more than cruelty. It wanted sentences that couldn't be argued with, because they described reality too accurately to ignore. Months passed. My mother recovered slowly, learning her new medication schedule like learning a new language. She began sewing again, not because she had to, but because her hands needed purpose. We moved into Driftwood Lane and aired out rooms that had been thick with Odette's contempt. I repainted walls. I found my father's old toolbox in a closet, rusted but intact, and I cried quietly into sawdust. The Inkback protocol remained on my phone, still offering prompts when the city tried to humiliate me. But it no longer felt like a desperate lifeline. It felt like a reminder. You don't have to swallow. You can speak. You can document. You can refuse. One evening, as we watched lanterns float over the bay, paper lights bobbing like small planets, my mother asked, "Do you think that system will leave?" I looked at the Inkback icon and shrugged. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe it's just training wheels." My phone vibrated, and a final message appeared. Users who learn to counter no longer require compensation. The goal is autonomy, not addiction. Archive remains. Ledger persists. Goodbye. The icon dimmed. I stared. The app didn't uninstall. It simply stopped paying. The ledger remained, a record of every time I refused to be erased. I expected to feel loss. Instead, I felt steady, because the money had been useful, yes. But the true change was that my mother now knew how to tear contracts without shaking. And I knew how to answer politeness with spine. Outside, lanterns rose into dark sky. They didn't ask anyone's permission to glow, neither would we. In the months that followed, Greybridge didn't transform overnight. Systems rarely do. The civility upgrade remained on billboards, and people still apologized for taking up space. But small shifts began. At the dialysis clinic, a new poster appeared under the pastel slogan someone had taped it up during a night shift. It read, "Politeness is not consent." The administrator tore it down twice. It kept coming back. At the Port Authority, my supervisor stopped accepting informal concerns after I requested documentation. He began asking whose interests those concerns served, which was a radical question in a bureaucracy. Juno invited me to speak at a legal aid workshop about coercion contracts. I told a room of strangers that extortion often arrives as kindness, and that the first defense is naming it out loud. People nodded, eyes tired and grateful, because recognition is sometimes the only medicine you can afford. Rel began showing up too, sitting in the back, listening. After one session, he approached me and said, quietly, "I thought being family meant you had to tolerate anything." I answered, "No, family is supposed to make toleration unnecessary." He swallowed and asked if he could bring his mother someday. I didn't promise anything. Healing can't be coerced either. Aunt Sable tried to reinvent herself as a victim in community forums, writing posts about disrespectful youth and elder abandonment. But the ledger entries had leaked. Juno hadn't leaked them. But court documents are public in Greybridge if you know how to look. People began replying to Sable's posts with screenshots of her own words. Not insults, just her sentences, placed next to the contract clauses, placed next to the donor coercion timeline. The comments weren't vicious. They were factual. Facts are harder to sue. Sable's posts became quieter, then stopped. She tried to find me in person once, outside a grocery store, eyes sharp with a new kind of calculation. "Mara," she said, lowering her voice, "you're clever. You could make a lot of money consulting, teaching people how to..." respond. I stared at her. The Inkback protocol was silent now, but I didn't need it. "I'm not interested in monetizing survival," I said. "I'm interested in making it unnecessary." She scoffed, then looked away, as if my words were in a language she refused to learn. Odette deteriorated quickly in Bram's apartment. Not from some poetic curse, but from the simple math of neglect. Bram resented her. Sable avoided her. Nurses were expensive. Pride was cheap. Rel visited her most, bringing soup, changing sheets, doing the unglamorous work that doesn't earn applause. One afternoon he called me and said, "She keeps asking for Lena." My mother listened from the couch, her hand on her medication box, her face unreadable. After a long silence, she said, "No." It wasn't spoken in anger. It was spoken in clarity. "Tell her I hope she's comfortable," my mother said. "But I am not her caretaker." Rel's voice cracked. "I understand," he whispered. When he hung up, my mother exhaled as if releasing a weight that had sat on her lungs for a decade. Then she stood, went to the window, and opened it wide despite the cold. Sea air poured in. "I'm allowed to choose," she said softly, as if testing the sentence. I walked up behind her. "Yes," I said. "You are." Spring came. The Driftwood house began to feel like ours rather than a battlefield. We found a cracked frame of my parents' wedding photo in the attic. Glass shattered, the image still intact. My mother cleaned it carefully and set it on the mantel. "He would have hated the fighting," she said one evening. I nodded. "He would have," I admitted. "But he also would have hated watching you disappear." My mother looked at the photo, then at me. "He made me brave by loving me," she said. "You made me brave by refusing to let them call love weakness." The sentence settled in my chest like warmth. Outside, children ran down the lane with paper lanterns left over from the festival, their laughter unscored, unmonetized. I thought about the protocol's goodbye message: autonomy, not addiction, and felt gratitude for a strange tool that had paid me to grow a spine until I could hold it without wages. On the anniversary of my father's death, I walked to the pier alone. The cranes were still there, taller now, their shadows long. The company had replaced the faulty parts and posted a safety pledge in shiny letters. But no plaque carried my father's name. I stood where the accident had happened and listened to waves slap against pylons. A dock worker nearby complained to his supervisor about a broken harness clip. The supervisor waved him off with a joke about toughening up. I felt my throat tighten. For a second I imagined the Inkback icon buzzing, offering a prompt, offering payment. It didn't. But I didn't need it. I stepped toward